Hello. Hi,
Hello.
Elliott. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for taking the time to come on for a little bit. I think to date you're my first parapsychologist that's been on. So I've been trying, and I have a monthly regular, maybe every 2 months. James Anito comes on, and I was complaining about that, and he said that he knew somebody, and voila, here you are.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, James ended up joining my organization late last year, and he's a really good investigator. So I'm happy to have him.
Yes, absolutely. So for everybody that's watching or listening, I'm Taryn and the host of Paranormal Brew. And I have with me parapsychologist Elliott Van Dusen. Did I say that right?
You did, yep.
Okay, good. Elliott Van Dusen. So everybody knows about me. So they don't want to hear me talk. So I want to hear about you. And I have lots of questions. Me.
Great. No, it's perfect. Yeah. So I mean, I basically got into the paranormal. I guess I was interested in it because it shows like unsolved mysteries. I knew that I always wanted to be a police officer, and so I also had an interest in the paranormal. And unsolved mysteries was perfect because it always talked about cold cases, and then it always had like ghost stories and UFO stories and cryptids and things like that. So that really got my interest. And then when the television show came out, it came out in '93, but I didn't discover it until '97. But when X Files came out, I thought it was really cool that you had two law enforcement officers investigating the supernatural. So I decided to create my own organization called Paranormal Phenomena Research and Investigation, and we started to kind of do a little bit of paranormal investigations. And it wasn't until I moved to Halifax shortly after I created the organization. My mother actually had seen a newspaper article saying that there was a parapsychologist teaching courses at the Nova Scotia Community College. And so I enrolled in them and ended up meeting my mentor, Daryl Walsh, who's still a longtime friend and colleague of mine. And so I took his two courses. One was on apparitions, the other one was on psychic phenomena. And then once I completed those courses, he invited me to join his organization, which was the Center for Parapsychological Studies in Canada. So I got to work with some experienced people and gain some field investigation experience. Then in 2004, I joined the RCMP. So I learned very quickly that in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, you don't really talk about this kind of stuff. So I, much like my fictitious hero, I guess, Fox Mulder, I received a lot of ridicule, much like Fox did. So I kind of just did things on the side. I continued to take courses. I ended up earning a diploma in parapsychology, a few more certificates in parapsychology. Ended up doing a degree in parapsychology, and I still to this day take courses. I'm actually currently enrolled in one of Dr. Karen O'Keefe's from the UK's courses on poltergeists,
Hmm.
because the UK kind of looks at poltergeists a little bit different than North America, which I can explain a little bit later on. And then towards the end of my law enforcement career, when I knew I was getting ready to retire around the 13-year mark, I knew I probably only had a couple more years left in me. Um, I kind of started coming back out into the public. We revamped the Paranormal Phenomena Research and Investigation website. I started doing podcasts. Became involved in an investigation in Rhode Island, private residence, which was extremely haunted, and ended up writing my first book, which was called Evil in Exeter. And at that point, like I said, I didn't care. I kind of, started coming back out into the public. And then once I retired in May of 2020, now I just do this full time. Try and run the organization as best I can. And um, I've written two other books since then. And yeah, I
Really?
enjoy.
I only had the two.
Yeah, so I have Evil in Exeter, which was my first one.
Yeah.
Then I wrote Supernatural Encounters, which is the side of me up there. And then
Okay.
just late this fall, more Supernatural Encounters from law enforcement came out. And what happened there actually was funny. So when I wrote my first book, my mom had come to me and said, "Oh, I, really enjoyed that. You should think about writing another book." And I said to her, "Well, these types of serious investigations don't come along every day. I'm not really sure what else I would write about." But then I had this idea about mixing kind of my two passions, law enforcement and the paranormal, together. So I started by reaching out to a few colleagues of mine to see if they had any experiences. And sure enough, I started collecting some stories. And before I knew it, I had around 50 stories. And that's why Supernatural Encounters came out. And then once that one came out, it actually did really well. It was really well received. And so I started getting messages from other law enforcement from all over, and collecting more stories. And before I knew it, I over the last 2 years, I've collected close to 200 stories from law enforcement.
That's
Police officers,
crazy.
security officers, correctional officers,
That's
sheriffs.
awesome.
Yeah, and I've actually been credited by other people in the field of parapsychology for doing that, because they said, they've tried to talk to law enforcement before, they always get shut down, and how did I get these stories and things like that. And it was, I don't know if it was because I was a police officer and they knew that I was involved in parapsychology, or if I was just lucky. I'm not really sure, but I managed to, like I said, collect almost 200 stories from law enforcement. So
That is awesome. So there's a thousand things. Okay, so first, let me start by saying that Unsolved Mysteries, I never missed an episode. Robert Stack, I had the hugest crush on him. First of all, I can't remember how old I was. I was young, but my mom was always like, "He's like 75 years old." I'm like, "I don't care. He's hot." But anyway, it was an awesome show. I agree.
it was, it
Um,
was.
and also transitioned. I myself personally only saw, maybe there's so many, but I saw, enough X-Files, but my mother was obsessed. She owns um the DVD set, the whole of all the seasons. We named our dog Mulder.
Love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, and the music plays in my head forever, because she would stay up all night and she'd be up there. You'd hear her laughing and talk. I mean, she loves it. Loves X-Files.
That's awesome. I love that.
So, also, thank you for your service.
Oh,
I'm gonna
thank
throw
you.
that out there. I'm a huge police supporter. I love Leos. And then also, oh my gosh, see, I knew this was gonna happen. I knew this was gonna happen. Like I would have like all this stuff. Um, so it's interesting though, like ever since I've been investigating, now my father was a police officer, my brothers are cops, so I've been brought up in that world or whatever. So I got into the paranormal stuff really late. I didn't want nothing to do with it early on. And so I got into it late, but I always say, like when we're on investigations and stuff, if you're doing it the right way, it's almost parallel to the way that a police officer would do an investigation. You don't go into you don't approach a property by yourself. You know what I mean? Like make sure somebody's always with you. I mean,
Yes.
there's things that, and then you're also trained to be very observant, look out for things, hear things, like you use senses that, you're normally. So I always paralleled those two. You know, I'm not saying that, that they're exactly the same, because God, I could not do what you did. I mean, that is like a very heroic job. And, I love you for that. So, but I'm just saying, like, the investigative parts of things.
Yeah, for sure. And I've taken some of my skill sets that I learned from law enforcement and brought it back into parapsychological investigations. For instance, you know, when you do a criminal investigation, usually you have an exhibit person that just handles all the evidence, and you try and have as less contamination as possible with that. They call it the chain of custody, because every single person that touches, say, a knife that was used in a homicide has to go to court and testify what they did and where that knife was and all that. So I kind of brought the same skill set to PPRI. So when we do an investigation, there's one person that all the evidence we have is turned over to that one person. They download all that evidence and then give back people their equipment. And then that way, nobody can say like, oh, well, 10 different people had the equipment and you left it in the trunk of your car for 2 days, and, maybe something happened. We try and, keep the continuity of any evidence that we collect from our investigations, similar to what the police
Right.
do.
Yep.
The other skill set that I've taken as well is the interviewing. because I've received a lot of interviewing, interview interrogation, and also child interviews, which are a
Right.
lot more difficult to do than an adult, because an adult you can ask leading questions pretty much right off the bat if you wanted to. With a child, you can never ask a leading question. So if they don't disclose something to you, you can't really go at it from that angle. You kind of have to wait until they bring it up, and then you can ask some questions about it. So there's certain rules that I also bring, for my interview training to my parapsychological investigations as well. So it's definitely been handy.
I mean, the two have to. It's like Blade. You know what I mean? You're like a day walker.
Yeah,
Uh,
pretty much.
like you have this side of it and you have that side of it, and you're combining the two of them. So I had always okay. So when you were being like, I don't want to say made fun of, but people were like saying like, it's whatever.
Oh
This
no,
is when you were with law enforcement,
they
correct?
were even printing out proton packs and putting it on my locker. So
So
yeah.
they were like picking on you, make fun wise, but um, how all of a sudden did they change their mind and just start telling you stories? Like, how did they change, flip the switch like that, and then almost become supportive for you to be able to write books and stuff like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny. I know, like, early on in my career, I think I had 6 months service or maybe even less. I was called into the office because somebody, um, for whatever reason, no matter where I was posted, somebody would always decide to Google my name. And the only thing I attribute that to is I was a hard worker and one of those shining stars. And I was lucky. Out of 15 years, I think I only did 4 years uniform. The rest were on specialized units. So, which is kind of unheard of. So I was, definitely had a very solid police background. Um, so somebody would Google my name and see that I was involved in the paranormal. So very early on in my career, I was called into staff sergeant's office with my corporal. They were questioning me on my involvement with the paranormal, and they asked if I had told recruiting this information, and I said, of course, because they ask if you're part of any organizations, and I told them I was, part of this organization. The recruiter had no issues with it. They actually went as far to make me write a letter to departmental security to have them review my security clearance to make sure I was telling the truth. And I was a young guy, so I didn't want to make too many waves, but I was also really pissed off at this
Yeah, it
because
almost feels like discrimination a little bit, right? I
oh,
mean,
it definitely is today. You would not be able to do that in the workplace today. But back in 2005, it was a different story. Um, so anyway, the letter came back from departmental security and said we already know about this. Like, this is not a non-issue kind of thing. And I was really pissed off when I got it. And so I went into the office with the corporal and the staff sergeant, and I just said, "You guys do realize that the RCMP actually used to investigate UFO sightings, right?" And they said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, when I was going to university, a friend of mine who's a ufologist, Chris Stiles, had told me that the university I went to, St. Mary's University, has an archive in their library full of RCMP UFO files, and some of them are actually considered X files because on the file number they actually have an X on it, so they're like legitimate Canadian X files."
there's
And
legit X-Files.
so yeah, so I had gone to the library and I had photocopied. It was over 200 pages of UFO reports, and some of them are available through the Canadian Library Archives website now. You can actually download some of them. But anyway, they had no idea that the RCMP used to investigate this. It was taken very seriously. If you didn't report to the military that you were on a UFO investigation by the end of your shift, you would get in some serious trouble. They had special forms that you had to fill out, and
Really?
so once I kind of educated them on that, that was the last I heard of it. I didn't hear any more about it. Until like I went to different postings and people would Google my name again, and then I'd have to bring up the story again. But towards the end of it, like you said, I actually had a few police officers, come up to me and kind of tell me their experience. But at that time, I hadn't even written a book or even thought about writing a book. But people were sharing their experiences with me at that point. So yeah, and of course that was 15 years later, so people's
Right.
minds have changed, and people are a little bit more
Yeah,
respectful in the workplace.
but I feel like even 2005, even like that, it just seems, you know, I mean, I've always heard that the park rangers at Gettysburg were like that. They didn't want to talk about it. They ignored it, because I'm like, I know they see, I know. especially the ones that have to, patrol at nighttime and in the park and everything when nobody else is there. But I hear they won't talk about it. But, like you said, 15 years later, it's like starting to be a little bit more accepted, I guess. So people are not feeling as, so, you know what I mean? Like they have to hide stuff like that for some reason. I don't know why I don't know why that was such a thing, but.
Well, especially with UFOs now. I mean, like, since the last couple of years, we've got, the U.S. government, releasing more information about UFOs and things like that. But back in 2005, they really weren't doing things like that. So, times have certainly changed a bit.
I have so many more questions now. Like it just
Well,
like
fire away.
Arena like wants to explode. So okay, so then I was always under the impression that I like a long time ago, before I even knew about anything, I like before I knew anything about anything. I saw something on the internet about parapsychology. Of course, my brain is thinking paranormal. You know what I mean? Like this is a cool thing. I look up and I see like, oh, some colleges or community colleges, like they have like classes. You know what I mean? Like small little classes, nothing that you would get accredited for, but like little things like this. And then, so I'm thinking it's paranormal, but then all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, I found out that it's not. And parapsychologists kind of feel that the paranormal field is taboo. Like they don't want anything to do with it.
Well, there's certain things, I guess, that don't fall under parapsychology. So, for example, parapsychology is actually the study of extrasensory perception, mind matter interaction, or what's called psychokinesis, and then survival, which is my favorite because survival includes apparitional investigations. It also includes out of body experiences, near death experiences. Um, Mind matter interaction is mostly, the ability to move things with your mind, or what's called RSPK, or recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, which is one of the theories of poltergeist activity.
Yes.
Because
Can you train yourself to do that?
Sorry, what was the question?
Can you like train yourself to do that?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, there are spots that can help you train and practice. I mean, the more practice you do, the better things that you do. I took a course from the Rhine Education Center where they have you do an activity, a remote viewing activity. So the instructor goes out at a certain date, certain time, which but then that's all the details that you know. So at that particular date and time, you would think about what that professor's doing, and you would write down notes and anything that comes to mind. I was completely way off in my description, but I'm also, I don't feel like I'm a very sensitive person. But it was funny because I had a lot of the same description that other classmates had as well. Like I saw like a bridge, and I saw water, and I saw a park bench, and other students had mentioned similar things. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, they do have, there's like a psychic group, for example, with the Rhine Research Center that people can join if they're, if they're new and just kind of feeling out their abilities and things like that. And it's kind of a support group, and they can kind of help you,
cool.
help educate you and give you some exercises to help your skill set. So
nobody wants me to be able to move anything with my mind. There would be like people in cars trying to cut me off. I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, it's interesting. Even the government has studied that ability as well. The CIA for sure has done some mind control experiments and have been very interested in psychokinesis. Um, but it has been detected in the laboratory, obviously. Which
So you disagree with that? You think that the paranormal and the parapsychology really do go like they mix together?
Well, I do think some things do, like ghosts. Obviously, ghosts fall under paranormal, and they actually fall under parapsychology as well, because of the survival aspect. Because we're interested in survival of consciousness beyond bodily death. Other things, though, that are classified as the paranormal don't fall under parapsychology. So, for example, UFOs don't, and cryptids don't. They're two different things, but
Right.
they're considered paranormal, but they're not part of parapsychology.
Wow. So, okay. Because there's I don't know if this is what you were talking about, but I know I reached out to some people in West Virginia or Virginia, maybe.
Hmm.
There's a college out there, or there's like a research center. Like, to
Hmm.
me, I feel like I agree with you. Like, I feel like this is important. Like, this stuff, the stuff that is studied in parapsychology and the way it's studied and how, um, data required it is and how controlled of environments it is and everything like that. Like, I feel like that's so pivotal for our field as well.
Hmm. Oh, for sure it is, and like there's been some great studies that have been done in the laboratory. J.B. Rhine in 1936 did a study with cards and subjects, and was able to determine that extrasensory perception is not limited by distance, and that's important because if you have a legitimate, say, medium, for example, and you're worried about, say I'm in Nova Scotia and the medium I want to talk to is in California,
Mhm.
and they can only do it over the phone because I can't afford to travel to see them. According to that study, that medium should still be able, if they're a legitimate medium, should still be able to do their job because extrasensory perception is not limited by distance. They were able to do different experiments, even not just on the property of Duke University, but also internationally. So there's been some really important studies there. Like another really great study was done by Daryl Bem, and it was called. There's an article on the internet called "ESP is Real," and what Daryl Bem was able to do was he used erotic images, and people were able to guess when they were brought up on the random generator on the computer. They were able to. There was a high statistical probability on when they could tell that the images were going to appear. So there's all kinds of different studies that parapsychologists are doing in the laboratory. I'm more of a field guy. I'm not associated to any universities, and haven't done any laboratory research myself. I keep up to date on the studies, and obviously, I'm on the Rhine research team, which meets every Wednesday to discuss new studies and new articles and things like that. So I keep up to date on it, but I'm more like parapsychologist Lloyd Auerbach, who's more like a field kind of parapsychologist. I like to get my hands dirty, I guess.
That's awesome. I think it's awesome. He's actually coming on too, but April 20th he'll be on.
Oh, he's great. He's
Yeah.
he's taught me a lot of the courses from the Rhine Education Center. He wrote my foreword in my newest book. There, More Supernatural Encounters. I have nothing but respect for Lloyd. He's got some great experience.
So I'm so happy that you do this. First of all, a police officer, parapsychologist, and paranormal investigator. So, like, when the studies that you're doing, right? Like, when you were just talking about the medium and if it's a true medium and stuff, would you then classify that as paranormal, or would you classify that as the human mind in a scientific way is making that happen?
Well, that's a really good. That's a really good question. I mean, obviously, it's right now it's considered paranormal, but there is that feeling that once we study this more and learn more about it and understand it, that it will just become normal. I think that I think we all have intuition for sure, especially as a police officer. You have intuition. You pull a car over, and just the way somebody says something or the way somebody just acts, even if it's just slightly, your spider senses, as we call it in law enforcement, goes off. And next thing you know, you're checking a trunk, or checking somebody, and you find drugs or a weapon on them. So I do think that we all have that ability. I just think that some people are a lot more sensitive and have been able to train themselves to do it a lot more. When you talk to a lot of mediums, actually, a lot of them, say that when they were a child, all these things were happening around the house. Like they would know things, or they would have spirit talk to them, but they didn't really know what was going on, only to find out once they grow up that they have the ability, and that it runs in the family. But a lot of people try and turn that skill set off. From what I've talked to, it scares them, and they try and shut it down, basically.
All right. Did you ever talk to that? They had a movie about it, and I'm sure the movie was exaggerated. All movies are exaggerated, but the detective in New York, Eric
Yes.
Eric Bana played him in the movie. I always forget the name of the movie, but that was such a good movie. But did you ever speak with him?
No, I haven't. I haven't spoken to him. I've seen the movie though, and there's two in New York actually, two
Mm.
police officers that kind of do paranormal stuff, and one of them had a TV series as well for a short amount of time. But no, I haven't spoken to them.
Yeah, this guy. I feel like this was like a while ago. This guy, he was a detective, I think. But I feel like that was like based on a true story. I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was really good.
It was really good, yeah.
Also in New Jersey, just so you know, there's
Hmm.
a place called Gabriel Davies Tavern, and it's located in a Glendora, New Jersey, 1700s. The police get called out there all the time.
Interesting.
All the time. The craziest story that one of them has told me, or told our group when we were there, because we used to go there, raise money for them. We'd do investigations and stuff like that for it. The owner of the place is buried on the property, all kinds of stuff. So it's a pretty, you can just feel it in on the land even, anyway, the craziest thing that a police officer ever said, told us happened was that somebody had called 911 from inside the house, like
Hmm.
from a phone from inside the house, the landline, because it was coming across as a landline, I guess. They picked it up. Nobody was there. It happened like 3 or 4 more times. So finally they went over there and called the people that run it, and the historical society came over, whatever, opened up the door, and then, they said, well, what number was it? And this, that, and they were like, that was the phone number back in like the 1800s. And there's no working phone in this house.
Wow. That's
And,
that's
yeah.
really interesting though that you mentioned that, because in my book, More Supernatural Encounters from Law Enforcement, there was a young female police officer. She was fairly new, and she had received a 911 call from a funeral parlor. And so she attended, and this guy opened the door, and it was funny. I remember interviewing her, but she describes him as being like Lurch from the Addams Family. She said, he was dressed really nice in the funeral attire, and he was very tall, and he spoke very slow and purposeful. And she said that the police had received 911 call from here, and she has to come in and check things out. In Canada, we're allowed to go in once a 911 call is received to check things out without a warrant. Because,
Wow. That's amazing.
well,
I feel
there's
like,
there's been cases where the police have been called 911, and then they don't go in, and they find out somebody was murdered or somebody was held captive.
while the police were outside the door,
Yeah, so anytime a 911 call is received in Canada, the police do have the common law authority to come into the house to check
That's
it out.
awesome.
So the guy invited her in, of course, and brought her to where the only phone in the funeral home was. It was in the kitchen. It was one of those portable phones. So she checked the log, and there was no call to 911. So she continued checking the funeral parlor, and she went down this hallway, and she said she hit a cold spot for sure. She could definitely feel like a cold spot. And then she went into a room where a body was being prepared for burial, and next to the body was one of those landline phone jacks. And she saw that, and got really spooked out and kind of left. So, and it's kind of interesting because it kind of reminded me of your story where you said, this phone number from the 1800s had shown
Yeah.
up. Well, here you have a fresh body within the last, at least 24, 72 hours
Right.
next to a phone jack, and that's usually when alleged phone calls from the dead and things like that happen. Is usually very shortly after death. So I thought her story was kind of cool, but it really reminded me of your story.
Yeah. So do you find that most of the stories the police officers are giving you are when they're working or when they're off of work?
I've had a mix. I've had both. Of when they're on duty and not. Another interesting story from another. It was a female RCMP officer as well. So they got called to a house saying from a woman that was home with her kids. The husband was away, and they were hearing noises come from the basement. So she thought that maybe somebody had broken into their basement. So the police attended, and when they rolled up to the residence, the male police officer that was with the female said, "Oh, geez, this place." And she said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he's like, "Oh, nothing." And they went in and they went down to the basement and they checked around, and there was nothing. And in this one corner of the room, it was kind of an unfinished part of the basement. It was just kind of concrete floor and just being used for storage. And so they check, and there's nothing there, no broken window, no indication that anyone's been down there. And so they turn around, they're about to walk up the stairs, and just like a scene from a horror movie, apparently a red ball started, they could hear it bouncing on the floor. You know, that sound when a ball hits the concrete floor and it's got that air sound to it. And they
Mm-hmm.
turned behind them, and all of a sudden, this red ball was thrown at them, and it was like bouncing on the floor. And so the two of them skedaddled upstairs and, told the lady that everything was fine downstairs. They didn't see anything. And just as they were leaving, the husband came home. So the female that told me the story was really happy that the husband was home,
Yeah.
because she kind of felt bad leaving her there. And then when they got back into the car, the male police officer spoke up and said, "Yeah, this house, I've been here a couple times, and everyone says it's haunted." And that was really freaky, kind of thing. So that's another example of something that happened, well on duty. And some of the stories are just phenomenal.
I I mean, I have to imagine, and especially in places that maybe might be where the energy might be a little bit more, you know, amped up in some places, you know what I mean? So since you have a niche for like getting stories out of people, you should probably then go to Gettysburg and talk to the park rangers there.
That's definitely a cool spot. I've never been. I would definitely like to go. Everyone says it's probably one of the most haunted places in America.
It's my favorite. I want to move there actually. I have the coordinates tattooed on my arm. I love Gettysburg.
Oh, that's cool.
I go probably 15 times a year. I love it so much.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll definitely
Um,
have to get there for sure.
you do. And I know that there are park rangers. So listen, I don't know what goes into writing your book, but if you do decide to do that, I will like be your assistant or whatever for your trip.
Definitely, yeah, no, for
You're gonna
sure.
do like the Gettysburg thing. I will go around with you, and I will whatever I'll be your little bitch. You're like, go get me coffee and donuts. I'm like, okay.
Well, if I ever do take a trip there, I'll let you know, and we'll see if we can time it up.
Absolutely, I would love to. It'd be awesome. I just met up with I had met friends from Tennessee. They're SRS Paranormal. They were coming up to Gettysburg, but they're like, we can't go without you because you know that place better than anybody I know. So we did, and it was a whole weekend. I'm not, but just investigating. It was so fun. It was awesome.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so that's cool. Yeah, no, I totally would do it anytime. Um, I forgot what I was gonna say. Question I had. Oh, yeah. So do you ever get people like from would you ever be able to do a book like army or, soldiers and this and that, stuff like that? Like, I mean, do you also get other people, other professions like, oh, okay, I know you do police officers, what about military or what
Yeah,
about
actually, some of the stories in my books are from military. My future brother-in-law used to be an air traffic controller with the Royal Canadian Air Force, and he told me about a UFO sighting that he witnessed when he was in the tower working one day. He said that basically they were getting a couple. They were doing kind of training, and there was a couple of CF-18s up in the air, and they saw this object up in the sky, but nothing was showing up on radar. So of course they asked the control tower for permission to go and investigate. So they gave them permission, and basically they described like a silver glowing object in the sky. And of course, once the CF-18 fighter jets approached it, it disappeared. Your typical UFO story. So of course, any activity such as that has to be written down in their log. And so Andrew had written it all down in the log, and then he went on his days off. And then when he came back to work, he was telling his coworkers about the UFO sighting that happened on his last shift, and they're like, "Yeah, right," and they didn't believe him. And he went to the logbook and opened up where he had written his notes, and you could see the page had been torn out. And so he said there's another department within the military that kind of investigates UFOs. So they must have came and took the logbook, but somebody ripped the page out, and he never saw it again. So
It's so crazy to me that it's so I mean, like, everybody always thought the government knew about UFOs, you know what I mean? But now more and more and more is coming out, like, for sure, like real evidence, and of them at least investigating and looking into it, and they are humoring, that it exists, or
yeah,
it does.
yeah, for sure. Like one of the alarming things I found that they released this year is that I think it was a senator in the states that's on the intelligence committee, but he basically said that they know that there's UFOs. They don't know what they are, but they do know that they're interested in nuclear sites, which I found, that's
Ooh.
that's that's pretty alarming. There's been a lot of UFO sightings near nuclear sites, so there's
That
definitely
is.
something going on. And I know that the U.S. government just created a new department, or a new kind of like a Project Blue Book kind of thing again, to investigate UFO sightings.
Yeah,
Um,
claims. And is that just, well, like, within the administration, or is that just anybody? Or is that, like,
I would
army,
imagine
military?
they'll probably like release reports to the public, but it's going to be obviously very censored and not a
Right.
whole lot of detail in there.
But no, but I mean, like, do you think that they're going to, now, I started to watch Project Blue Book, but I think I watched, like, the first season. I kind of, like, stopped watching. Um, but and not that it wasn't good. I don't know. I kind of lost interest. I don't know why. But do you think that they're going to be investigating mostly, like, government, government people, like, military and people in the White House, or people in, people that are reporting these things, like, not just me. Like, if I was like, "Oh, hey, I saw a UFO yesterday," is Project Blue Book, quote unquote, going to come to my door?
Um, I would think I haven't seen like their exact mandate on if it's just. I don't think it's just government. It's my understanding it's not just government UFO sightings. It's going to be pretty much anything. It falls under the Defense Department, so anything that would be reported that would threaten national security, I believe that they're going to look into. And of course, they'll be releasing reports, but they're going to be heavily censored for sure.
Do they?
Having worked for the police, I know that things don't get released to the public all the time. So yeah, it'll be
Okay.
it'll be interesting though to see what they come up with.
Yeah. Have you? Do they work with MUFON?
MUFON is trying to get their foot in the door there, actually. Yes, I did get an email from MUFON asking people to write to their congressman or the senator, telling them that they're the longest standing civilian UFO investigative group, and that they could assist the military with their trained
Absolutely.
investigators. Um, so they are trying to get their foot in the door with them, but I haven't heard anything further on that.
I mean, I think that they're probably the only group that could have a shot at getting in there.
Yeah, I would say that probably. I mean, really, they're probably the
I mean, they're
biggest and
very
active.
secretive. They've proven to
Yeah.
be very secretive, so it's
Oh,
not like.
MUFON is, yeah, they don't
Yeah,
really, unless you're a member, they don't really tell you much on what's going on. I
which
mean, you can sign up for their newsletter, but I mean, it's basically just statistics. It's, how many UFO sightings there were in the state of Rhode Island this month, kind of thing. But as far as getting like copies of their field investigative reports, it's pretty hard.
yeah, so, I mean, that's gotta be, a plus for them trying to get in, and I honestly think, because as soon as you said that, I'm thinking, "Oh my god, you know how many people claim to see a UFO daily?"
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's lots, especially now, like with drones and things like that. UFO sightings have certainly increased over time.
And I
Um,
and I feel like MUFON could be that step in between, because, MUFON only takes cases that have a high percentage rate of maybe being legit, like, I'm sure they get thousands of calls a day as well,
Yeah,
And
yeah, I mean, maybe they'll come up with some sort of agreement where, if MUFON screens out a UFO sighting and determines, like, hey, we checked the satellites, it wasn't satellite. We checked the weather, it wasn't weather related. It basically MUFON is designated as an unknown sighting or unexplained sighting, and then they could pass that information on to the government.
oh, and guess what's going to happen? So I see this is happening. So one of my friends, she was in my group. I don't know that much about it, obviously, because of the situation. However, she was in my group. She was with our special response team where they would only go out for like negative cases and stuff like that. Somehow this wound up being something that they had to submit into MUFON. And MUFON contacted her back, asked for everything that she had, and that was the last time they ever heard from her. Or that was the last time she ever heard from them.
Yeah.
This is going to be the same. Like, they're going to give all their work to the military, and the military's like, all right, thanks, bye. And
Yeah, I think that's what'll happen for sure. I think that unless maybe like some of the higher ranking people in MUFON that have like a scientific background or something like that may be subcontracted out. But I think you're right. I think they'll collect the info from MUFON, but that'll probably be as far as it'll go. I think the new organization is called the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. That's the name that the U.S. government gave it. So, yeah. Yeah.
So okay.
If anyone's interested in that, I mean, there's some recent news articles on it, but yeah, it's basically just in the kind of collecting information stage right now.
So do you believe in UFOs?
Do I believe in UFOs? Well, I mean, they certainly exist. I've seen one myself in Beaverbank, Nova Scotia. We were actually on a ghost investigation. So we were not thinking UFOs at all, and we had gone into an abandoned Canadian American military base in Beaverbank. They used to have kind of a radar system there, and it was abandoned. So we were up checking it out. There's always been stories of strange lights and that the building's haunted and creepy and all that stuff. So we were there checking it out. We actually did collect electronic voice phenomena on the stairwell
Awesome.
while we were there. And then as we were leaving, we saw this. There was 4 of us, I think, and we saw this strange light in the sky. And we, of course, had the video cameras there because we were on investigation and tried to film it. And within minutes, of course, the camera died. And I don't know if it was related to the UFO sighting or if it was just because we were there for a couple of hours filming at the Beaverbank site. But this would have been April 2004, and there was the light was kind of like bobbing up and down, and it was very slow. So it wasn't like a steady aircraft where it was just kind of flying. It was like you could see it bobbing up and down. But suddenly, a second red object came and kind of met up with the other object that we saw, and then they both kind of just flew up and just disappeared. So at the time, I don't know if the website still exists now, but there was a website I think called heavenabove.com, and you could go on and see where satellites were positioned at that time. So of course we went on and checked, and there was no satellites in the area at the time. There was nothing going on with the weather. It was a clear night. The next day we called Transport Canada, and this is before 9/11. Obviously, no, sorry, this was after 9/11. So of course they wouldn't tell us whether or not there was any airplanes in the area at that time. Maybe back in the day they probably would have let that kind of information go, but this was 3 years after 9/11. So of course they were not going to tell people what flight paths were and things like that. So that was the only thing that we couldn't rule out. But the way that they moved, it didn't move like a conventional object.
Yeah.
So, so I mean, they definitely exist, but what are they? I guess is the real question.
So, is it safe to say do you believe in cryptids?
You know what, I do, and the reason why I do is I literally just read an article this week saying that they found multiple schools of these fish underneath the ice in Antarctica that they didn't know existed there. And this is 2022. So they're constantly, if you go on Google and type in new creature found or new animal found and hit the news button, you will see that people are finding new species and new critters and insects and animals almost, I wouldn't say every day, but they're finding them at least every year for sure. So is it possible that there's some sort of animal out there that's really good at hiding and avoiding people? I mean, I think it's possible for sure. I think it would be crazy to say that it's impossible.
Listen, the week of Christmas, right? 7 days straight, I was in my car because my brother saw a Yorkie running around his neighborhood, right? So baby Yorkie, you'd see her, people would see her, and she'd just disappear. So I wound up naming her Littlefoot because she's like literally like this 5-pound little dog, and for over a week, she's running around this neighborhood. People are seeing her, nobody can catch her, and then when we're going out there to try to trap her, we can't find her. We don't see her anywhere. We have no idea where she's at. I'm like, nobody's getting a picture of her. Nobody can get a picture of her. She's too fast. I'm like, it's like Littlefoot. I'm like, so if that can happen, then yes, I believe that they're able to hide very good.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it just depends on the environment. I mean, there's still parts of the ocean that we haven't explored. So I mean, every time they send a robotic submarine down there, they're always finding new marine life. So I mean, what's to say that there's not new life crawling around in the forests on land?
It actually, the ocean though really makes me anxious thinking how big and deep the ocean is and like what possibly could be out there. I've never been on a cruise, and it's not because of Jaws. It's because of that thought. Like being somewhere where you can't see land.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I've never done a cruise either, and it doesn't really interest me. I'm sure it's cool, and I'm sure a lot of people have fun, but no, I agree with you. My fiance and I always laugh. We always have a joke. We always say nothing good comes from the ocean because when you watch horror movies and stuff like that, it's always sharks and killer krakens and things like that. And we always say nothing good comes from space because she hates watching space movies because she finds them so depressing because she's like, oh, someone's gonna float off and die.
Oh, I know. No, I'm not depressed. I have anxiety the whole time when they're up there. I'm like, oh my, I could never. I'm obsessed with it. I love meteor showers, lunar eclipses. I'll watch it. Something's going on up in the sky. I love it. I'm all about it. I'm a trooper. But when it comes to the movies, I'm totally with her. Except I'm like, I would never. You could never pay me to go that far away from like the Earth and just be out there like, hey guys, out in space. Nope.
Yeah, well, it's crazy how vast the universe is.
Oh,
I mean, even to get to Mars, I mean, they have to launch at certain times when Earth and Mars are the closest, and even then, it takes 9 months to get there.
So crazy.
I can't remember which Mars movie it is. They've made so many of them, but there was the one where they basically almost get to the planet, I think, and then there's something wrong, and they basically have to turn back. And NASA's like, "Well, it's going to take you 9 months to get back. Like, we don't have the resources, all that stuff." Yeah, like so, it is unreal.
9 months. Can you think about that? Yeah. I'm going to Gettysburg. It's like 3 hours away. Oh my God, it's so far. Yeah, I'm going to Mars. It's 9 months away. Okay.
Yeah.
See you in 9 months.
No, it's true. It's true.
That's insane. Then spirits, ghosts, afterlife. Are you a believer?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we know that ghosts exist, but I think the real question again is what are they? We all hope that it's a discarnate entity that has, that human consciousness survives bodily death. Otherwise, if we were able to prove that doesn't happen, I bet you'd have a lot less people working. You'd have more people backpacking and just enjoying life, knowing that this is the one shot that you have.
Yeah.
instead of slaving away Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. But we do know that there's other things that can cause ghosts and spirits to be seen. For example, Dr. Michael Persinger, who is now deceased, was a professor at Laurentian University in Ontario, Canada, and he developed what was called the God helmet. So he took a snowmobile helmet and he put some electrodes in it, and he was able to find research participants to come into the laboratory. And when they increased the geomagnetic energy to a certain level, people would experience haunting characteristics. They would see apparitions. Some people would even see religious figures. Some people reported seeing Jesus Christ and Virgin Mary.
You're saying geo, not is that it's not EMF. You're saying geo.
Yeah, geomagnetic energy. Yeah.
Geomagnetic.
Yeah, so from the Earth, because Dr. Michael Persinger was a skeptic. Interestingly enough, he was a skeptic of the paranormal. He thought that a lot of it surrounded the environment and the Earth's magnetic field, and that would cause people to see things. And he was able to prove it in the laboratory. We also know there's been 2 cases of carbon monoxide poisoning, which has caused people to experience haunted characteristics. So last year, I purchased a gas detector for our organization. So it detects carbon monoxide. It detects H2S gas, which has a sulfuric smell. So that would be great in a dynamic haunting where people are reporting the
Absolutely,
smell of
yeah.
sulfur. It detects oxygen, and it detects low-level explosive gas. But the 2 cases, so there's one in either 1920s or 1930s where a family was experiencing a haunting. And when they called in some psychical researchers to investigate, they found out that the furnace was giving off excessive amounts of carbon monoxide, which was causing the family to experience a haunting. And once that was fixed and repaired, the haunting ceased. And then, just as recently as 2005, there was a lady taking a shower when an apparition appeared in the shower with her. So, of course, she was freaked out, and, of course, called some paranormal investigators. They were able to determine that her newly installed hot water tank had been improperly installed and was giving off carbon monoxide
That's amazing. That's good
levels.
investigators. That is
Yeah,
very
no,
good
very, very good.
investigators.
Very good. I've actually had a case myself where the house was haunted, and I usually tell this story on the podcast. But we were also able to determine some things that the homeowners might want to get fixed. So I think it was back in 2003. We were contacted by a family that had just moved into a home that was from the 1800s, and they were experiencing some paranormal phenomena. They said that one of their dogs had passed away, and they'd seen the apparition of the dog. They said they saw an apparition of a lady walking down their stairwell. They thought that there were some faces showing up in some of their photographs, and they sent it to us. And one of the faces did look like a Aboriginal man, almost like a chief, like a male chief. You could
Mm.
see like the distinct cheekbones and things like that.
Mhm.
And the strangest thing, they were having pennies materializing in their home. So I thought that the case was really interesting. So I got together some of our investigators and we traveled down to Kentville, and we spent the night there. And of course, as soon as we get there, we checked everything and the house was clean. They showed us a jar full of pennies. And of course, it's not too impressive because it could just be a family saving up their change, right? Um, but as the night went on, we had a camera set up in the kitchen, and it kind of pointed towards like the kitchen sink and the stove and the fridge, and there was no other way to get into there. You had to come in through the living room and then go through the dining room, go into the kitchen. So we set that up, and every hour on the hour, one of my investigators would go and check and make sure the tape's still recording, that the batteries are still good. And around either 1, 2 in the morning, um, the investigator, you can hear him get off the couch. You can hear him approach the camera. When he looks down at the base of the tripod, a penny had materialized there. And
Wow.
when you listen to the tape, of course, it was by the base of the tripod, so it wasn't on film, but you could hear everything. So it wasn't like he stood up and dropped the penny, because you would have heard it hit the floor. You couldn't hear any rustling. And plus, we were sitting there watching him. He didn't bend over at any time. So a penny literally had materialized while we were there. The other interesting thing that we
Mm.
detected when we were there is where the family was reporting the apparition coming down the stairwell, we were getting really high EMF readings on the electromagnetic field radiation detector. So, all this happened in one night. It was really interesting. I asked the homeowners if we can come back for a second night. They agreed. Brought a bigger team this time and had some people stay outside with night vision, and the rest of us were inside the house. And we are still getting that high EMF reading by the stairwell. So one of my investigators had the idea to go downstairs and turn all the power off to the house. And once that happened, the reading disappeared. So he turned the power back on and the reading came back on the EMF reader. So he asked me to stomp my foot where I was standing, and he followed the sound and the wires underneath the house. And because the home was built in the 1800s, the wires had become kind of frayed and were exposed. So they were giving off higher and unhealthy amounts of electromagnetic field radiation. So
That's amazing. Like I haven't even I'll be honest with you, and it's been a long time since I've done a private home investigation or anything like that. And I am so anti-equipment. Like anything that's made for paranormal investigating, I'm just like I can't do it because it's just, to me, if it's man-made, it's too easily be able to not be, but I would use stuff like that, carbon monoxide testers, or, stuff like that now that I know.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because
Yeah.
there's no, and they do market it, ghost hunting equipment and paranormal equipment, and paranormal research is on the REM pod. It says, paranormal research device. But the truth is that there's actually no piece of equipment that can detect the ghosts. It's actually a fallacy. But what there is that there's equipment out there that true paranormal investigators and parapsychological investigators use that can help, such as that EMF reader, such as
Yeah.
the gas detector, things like that to help explain what's going on in the environment. Um,
That's what I like, because
but
that's how I investigate. I go in there looking for reasons why there would be experiencing things. And
Absolutely, and then that's kind of the mind frame that you have to take. In any, if you take any courses or anything like that, that's what they'll teach you to do, is look for the rational explanations first. But I mean, this house was definitely haunted. First, we had the penny thing happen, but one of my investigators on the second night was looking through the night vision and saw some movement up in the upstairs window, and he asked if we were upstairs, but all of us were downstairs at the time. So he told the other investigator to wait outside and he was going to go in and check. And when he went upstairs to the bedroom where he saw the movement happening, he opened the door and he saw an apparition of a little girl sitting on the bed.
oh wow.
And he froze and panicked, of course, as I'm sure anybody would do once they saw a ghost. And
Mhm.
once the apparition disappeared, he called us on the radio, told us to get up there right away. So we all went upstairs. There was 6 or 7 of us in the bedroom, and the EMF reader was still going off in there sporadically, which was interesting. And it was going off towards the closet. And one of the investigators opened the closet door, and all of a sudden, we felt like this ice cold air come through all of us at the same time, like took our breath away.
Mhm.
And then it kind of dissipated. And at the time, I had a reverend on the team, and so he did kind of a prayer or um, whatever, and just all of a sudden the room kind of felt peaceful, and the EMF reader stopped buzzing, and it was a really interesting experience. And then we were able to determine. So we had the apparition, we had the penny appears, 2 unexplained events. We were able to solve the EMF issue by the stairwell. That was unshielded wires. The other thing that we found out was the pictures. We were able to replicate them because it was an old home. It had like these like beautiful, like almost like cherry wood kind of colored
Oh, yeah.
frames and this high gloss on it. So when you would take a picture and the flash would hit it, it would um, kind of reflect images back to the camera. And so what that's called is visual pareidolia. And it's when the mind tries to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. So for example, when you look up at a cloud and you can see Mickey Mouse or you can see a pterodactyl or whatever, that's your mind trying to place an image that it understands in there so that you understand it. And the same thing can happen with audio pareidolia as well. When we think we hear something, that's why EVPs are kind of tricky. It's funny, the majority of EVPs I listen to, when somebody doesn't tell me what it says, I don't understand what it's saying unless it's very clear.
Right.
But as soon as somebody says, listen to this EVP, it says help me, that's all you can hear after that. and it's because your mind again is trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense.
Absolutely, I agree. I mean, me myself, I tend to like not all the time. I don't think I'm a sensitive person at all, but for some reason I can hear and I'll say what I heard,
Hmm.
and then on the recorder you'll hear the thing and I repeat exactly what I heard, even like the way it sounded or if it was, you know what I mean? And you hear that on the recorder. Um so I started because I do tend to go down rabbit holes with things sometimes, right? So I started to think like maybe my mind is like when you're on an investigation and you're asking questions, you're wanting an answer so bad, right? So you're like asking all these questions. You're like, in your head, like subconsciously, do you already have that answer? You know what I mean? And that's what you're hearing, right? So I started thinking that, and I'm like, oh my god, I mean, that's my favorite part of investigating is getting EVPs. I'm like, it's gonna ruin me, like if I believe that, right?
Well, that's another great point that you bring up is there's actually four theories on electronic voice phenomena. The one theory is that it's audio paradolia, so it's something that we're hearing that we want to hear. Obviously, the theory that we all want it to be is that it's a discarnate entity trying to communicate with us. Another theory with it is that it's telepathy from either the homeowners that are there or other investigators that are there, and that your thoughts are being recorded on the device. And it's actually interesting. I kind of have a back-to-back podcast night tonight. I have your show, and then I'll be appearing
Oh
on
damn!
the Outer Realm later with
I mean, I'm just saying. I have so many more questions.
I'll be appearing on the Outer Realm after this with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. But Michelle actually had this theory come true. So she actually was on an investigation. She told me where she was interviewing the family, like the initial interview with her and her technologist. They were recording the interview, but her daughter was sick and her daughter was at home with the husband. So during the interview, she kept saying, like, oh my God, I got to get home. My daughter's sick. I got to get home. My daughter's sick. So the family kind of told them the initial story to see if it's worth doing like a full investigation. And then they left. And when her technology guy was downloading the statement and listening to it and transcribing it, he actually heard Michelle interrupt the lady while she's talking and say, I got to get home to my daughter. She's sick. And it didn't make sense to him because the lady kept talking. There was no pause. Like it almost didn't seem like it was a natural flow of conversation. So he called Michelle up and he said, Michelle, I don't remember you saying this, but during our interview, this is what I listened to and this is what I heard. And she said, well, that's because I didn't say it. I was thinking it. But I mean, obviously, we're listening to these people's story. I'm not just going to like interrupt her and say, oh, my daughter's sick. I got to go kind of thing. Like I was there, trying to do the best I could. And that's like a real person that I know that it actually happened to.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, that would explain one, like, sometimes when somebody says something on your and on the recorder and you hear it's like something is talking over
mhm,
the person.
yeah.
Are you recording what they're thinking, or are you recording what you're thinking,
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah, and that's where it gets really muddy because it's, is it the investigators? Is it a discarnate entity? Is it the homeowners? And then the last thing is that they think it could possibly be at times is radio interference or cellular interference. And I actually had a case where a gentleman was talking to his friend on Facebook Messenger, and they were using the chat, not the type, but the voice messages. They were just sending voice messages back and forth. And on this one voice message, there was like this male sounding voice that was really loud and predominant, which is not typical of your electronic voice phenomena. They're usually quieter and like whispers. Um, and it interrupted their conversation. So somehow he found our group and he emailed me the clip. And I had a friend that still worked for the RCMP Technological Crime Unit at the time. So I sent him the clip and asked if he could analyze it and isolate the voices. And so we did all that. But what he was
I think
able to
that's
do,
so cool.
yeah, what he was able to determine is what he called crossover communication. Communication. He thinks somehow another conversation from Facebook somehow got crossed over to these guys' chat.
Well,
Um,
I maybe I can understand that, but a recorder, like an
yeah,
Olympus, you think Olympus could pick up like a CB radio?
You know what? It really, I guess it depends. Like, yeah, it depends on the type of recorder you're using, I guess, too, right? Your type of environment that you're in. There's
I'm going old
definitely,
school. I'm going to get a cassette and I'm going to play record at the same time.
well, I actually do think the tapes are great because I mean, back in the day, that's what psychical researchers would use as the old tapes, right? Um, there's a lot of people using apps now, but the only thing is, I'm like you, I don't trust the stuff that's made. So, for example, I know some people use EchoVox, and I think when I looked at it on Apple just a couple weeks ago, I think you have to pay like 20 some dollars to download it.
Oh my God.
But the only thing is it's promoted as an electronic voice phenomena app. So what's to say that the developers don't throw words in there related to a haunting, such as ghost or murder
Well,
or
the Ovilus used to do that. The Ovilus used to pop up Satan all
words?
the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Satan and all kinds of stuff. And I just I've early on spent thousands and thousands of I spent thousands of dollars and I use none of it.
hmm
I, I
The
only
other device that you see used all the time, which I am not a fan of at all, is the spirit box.
I'm not
Um,
either.
I mean, I've seen some cool videos where people have strung together like a sentence or whatnot, but we actually took it out to. It was this past fall. I was helping another group out. They were short investigators, and they asked if I wanted to come down and just kind of give like a lecture on parapsychology and show people equipment that is used during investigations. So every time the spirit box came out, I always told them, how garbage it is, and I don't like it. But we were actually out in a location where there's absolutely no radio station. So the spirit box actually didn't even work because it wasn't able to actually scan frequencies to pick up radio stations because we're out in the middle of nowhere. But people got to see how loud and annoying it is because all it does is cycle through
Mm,
the channels. And I mean, you're better off using just a tape recorder. And the
yeah.
other interesting thing is too is to use two of the same kind. So I went out and purchased. Most of my investigators the same type of audio recorder, and the reason why you do that is a legitimate electronic voice phenomena for some reason will only show up on one device, not both. So if it does show up on both for whatever reason, it would be highly suspicious because the legitimate ones seem to only show up on the one device, not the other, which makes it more authentic when you get that.
Yeah, and for me, like, I feel like I said, like, I hear it, and I'll say it. Not all the time though, not all the time. But almost every time I'm somewhere, and that was what I was gonna bring to my point was like one night I was at work, I wasn't investigating, I was getting ready to leave, I was packing up, I was down there by myself, and I heard a step and then a woman really loud say, "What is this place?" I was like,
Mhm,
now you can hear people walking. If they're going to walk up to the desk, they come around from around a corner. I wasn't thinking about it. All I wanted to do was go home. You
mhm,
know what I mean? Like, I'm not thinking about anything, and that was one of my girl. This is one of my peaches. We investigate together. She says I have a bionic ear because I can hear. She hears everything. But like I play back on the recorder, so we hear it. Everybody hears it right then and there. Like I mean, I call her Jossie, and literally we said what say her name, and I heard Jossie, and they didn't hear it. But then we would play back the recorder, and you hear it. And
mhm.
again, maybe it is me. I don't know. Maybe it's
Well, it's the paranormal. There's always more questions than answers. Daryl and I spoke to a family that had witnessed what sounds like a residual haunting. So we went and traveled to see them, and they live on this like old farm property. And they said one evening they had it was a husband and wife, and they had a couple over. So there's four of them. They're sitting around kind of a campfire, and they're having a couple drinks and chit chatting. And all of a sudden, the husband, the homeowner, saw this lady in white, wearing like old 1800 type dress, walking on his property towards them at the fire.
oh
And
wow.
so he asked the other people that he's with if they could see what he was seeing, and they couldn't see anything. They said, "No, what are you talking about?" And he said she walked right to where an old bridge used to be, and kind of walked across it and just disappeared. And so when we went there, we took pictures. You actually could see where the old bridge used to be, but they moved it over to the left now. So there's a new bridge, but it kind of made sense what he was seeing and reporting, because at the time of her lifetime, the old bridge would have been where she had crossed over. But out of the four people that were there, only one person witnessed the apparition, and he was actually yelling at her, like, "Can I help
Like,
you?
yeah, yeah.
What are you doing on my property?" And no one else saw it. So
That's awesome. I always tell people, like, sometimes I feel like that's like your antenna might be longer than mine, or, like, you might just be picking up. I wanted to share this really quick. A lot of people were sharing stuff, and normally I do talk, but there's so much, like, you have to come on again because,
I definitely will.
anyway. So Dover Paratech says electromagnetic signals do not propagate in the form of words. It would sound like buzzing and beeps. I only bring this up because, well, it's an interesting point, but I have a recording early on when I didn't even know what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing. It was me and my sister and her boyfriend, and we were running around in a cemetery, in the Pine Barrens. And, it was like a big long thing, but at one point I heard buzzing in my ear. My sister says that was somebody coughing. I said, something just buzzed in my ear. And she's like, oh, no, that sounds like somebody coughing. But when you listen back on the recorder, you hear this. And I said, something just buzzed in my ear. And she said, no, that sounded like somebody coughing. So right then and there, like, I think I understand what they're saying, but, like, I mean, I heard that with my ear, that buzzing sound, you know what I mean? And then she's saying she heard it as an actual cough.
Yeah, that's a really interesting experience.
And I have that recording. It's one of my favorites to this day, because there's also something else there. It's where I said, where's the car at? Because it got real dark and this and that. Lights went out. And I got discombobulated. I said, where's the car at? And nobody answered. Neither of them answered me. And I asked again, where's the car at? And my sister said, it's over there. Well, and then the buzzing thing happened, and then the cough. So it was like this whole big long thing together. But the first time I said, where's the car at? You hear, and it sounds like it's almost in the recorder. It's like, but it's over here. That's where I came from. Is this long sentence.
Yeah. It's funny because most EVPs too, it's usually like a word or a couple of words. Yeah.
It's one of my favorites for sure. And I don't know what time you have to go, but you can go whenever.
Oh God, I'm good until 10:30 my time, so it's 9:43 my time right now. So
okay, so you could just. Oh, I love that clip you are talking about. Yeah, it's so loud, and then you hear that if you use a dynamic microphone. He said, if you use a dynamic microphone. Now, this was back. I was probably, my God, I was probably like in my 20s. So this was like 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I had like, an Olympus recorder, one of the $50 recorders you pick up in, Radio Shack back in the day, So yeah, no, I wasn't using a microphone or anything. So to me, I started to say, like, okay, so if you hear buzzing, and then people would say, no, as you go on and you learn from different people and you talk to different people have different ways of knowing. Some people say it was buzzing, some people say high whistling noise.
Yeah.
Like all kinds of stuff. You just, so of the. Well, we won't count the police officer. So out of the parapsychology and the paranormal, is it an even balance, or are you more on the paranormal side of things, or you just combine them together and it's just one thing?
Well,
when I say paranormal, I mean ghosts, spirits, and like, intelligent, I can understand. I was going to say the one thing that you brought up really quick. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, go ahead.
the equipment that's being used to detect like the carbon monoxide, which I'm totally going to start using. I think it's such a brilliant idea. I don't want to go in there with an EMF detector. I want to go in there with the geo thing and like the carbon monoxide, the gases and stuff like that, because that would
Well, the EMF are still important because
No, I know. Yeah.
there was a case where my partner there, Daryl Walsh, investigated where somebody was experiencing an apparition in their bedroom. We often hear that. I was asleep, I woke up, saw an apparition at the foot of my bed. In his investigation, they were actually able to determine that he had this old alarm clock that was giving
Yup.
off excessive amounts of electromagnetic field radiation.
Yeah.
And that could possibly cause the person to see things. Obviously, there's also sleep states, the hypnagogic and hypnopompic sleep states, or waking sleep states. A lot of people seem to experience paranormal phenomena during that time. There's also, sleep hallucinations that can happen. So, I mean, there's all kinds of different things. But I mean, in that case, it is important. Sarah and I just investigated a haunted house down the road from us, and we checked out the wiring and everything was great, except I did pick up 2 old alarm clocks in the bedrooms that were giving off excessive amounts. Not enough that they were affecting where they slept. They were in different parts of the room. But I did make mention to them because, the FDA says anything that's 3.0 and up on the milligauss reading is unhealthy. So, I mean, if you have something in the home that's giving off excessive amounts, you probably don't want to have it in there. And some of their newer alarm clocks, like they had nice new digital ones, they weren't giving off anything. They were really well shielded and things like that. So it's definitely a tool that you'd want to have, but you don't want to have. I will say you don't want to have those K2 meters. A lot of people have them, and I assume it's probably because they're cheap, but they're cheaply made.
Mhm.
You'll want to get something a little bit more sturdy. I just bought a very expensive one. It's $350. It's called the GQ 390, but it's really cool because there's no more going around with a notebook and writing master bedroom this level. It actually documents it all on a hard drive or like a chip that's in the device, and you can
Hmm.
upload it to your computer, and it will kind of do all the data entry for you. And the other cool thing about the device is it tries to tell you what the signal is. It'll say Wi-Fi, cellular, electrical.
Oh,
Um,
what thing you're picking up? Oh, wow, that's
yeah,
cool.
yeah, it's really really cool. I got it off. I see somebody asking
Yeah.
where we
Or
got it. I actually got it off Amazon. I'm looking at it right now. There's one for sale for $181. The same one I have, the GQ EMF 390.
um crap. I had a question too. I was saying that kind of stuff would explain, when people move into a house that's supposedly like the Amityville horror house, right? Let's just take that one for example, whether it's true or not true, whatever. These people are having this paranormal experiences. They move out in 45 days. The next people move in, they're not experiencing anything.
Hmm.
So who knows? Maybe they got stuff fixed before they moved into the house. Maybe they got, that could probably explain why some people are experiencing stuff like that.
It could,
The
yeah, it
next
could, because
people
maybe they did some renovations and they fixed some problems. The other thing that we're taught as well is not to discount somebody's experience, because
right.
realistically, we go to these places for a night or a weekend or whatever, but the homeowners live there the majority of the time.
Oh, for sure.
And I can say from personal experience that the house in Exeter that I investigated was extremely haunted. But there would be times where for 2 weeks it would be completely quiet and nothing would happen. So I think some of it's just the timing, and
Absolutely.
you just never know with this thing. That's why survival is a hard area of parapsychology to study, because it's so spontaneous. You can't bring it into the laboratory. Like, these are human experiences that are happening in the field spontaneously, so it's hard to replicate it in a laboratory.
It is. And then without the laboratory, you don't have um control over your environment,
Absolutely, yeah.
you know?
And there's another interesting story. Actually, you should ask Lloyd when he comes on your show to tell it. But basically, he had a case where this developer had developed this home, and they kind of did a bunch of things that weren't to code, and the people were reporting all kinds of different haunting experiences. They were reporting balls of light. They were reporting walls and furniture catching fire. They were reporting one room that was freezing and the rest of the house was normal. And there was another room where they would get sick, like kind of like a headache and not feel well when they were in there. And when
Wow.
Lloyd and his team went in to investigate, they found a multitude of things wrong. So the subdivision was built on an old dump that was having methane gas rising from it.
Oh my
And it
gosh.
was also very dry and staticky. So the balls of light that people were seeing were actually static electricity. And then when
Oh,
it would hit
wow.
the pockets of methane, it would cause the furniture and the walls to catch fire. The room that was ice cold compared to the rest of the house had water running underneath the house, like a natural water
Like a spring.
pathway. And then the room that they felt sick in wasn't level at all. Like the architect or the designer had kind of done all kinds of different things to it, and basically wasn't up to code. So the fluids in their brain when they would go in, it would be like being on a ride or a roller coaster. It's causing your inner ear imbalances. So yeah, it's there's all kinds of different things out there other than the supernatural that can cause this kind of phenomena.
Do you feel is it more satisfying to get a scientific reason
Uh,
or to be left with the unknown of you believing that what you experienced was paranormal?
I mean, I think for some people it's a relief because obviously some people don't want to live in a
Right.
haunted house for sure. But for me personally, I would like to find that definitive answer of whether or not our consciousness lives on. Because, like I said, if we find out that this is the only life you have, you might enjoy that extra piece of cake after supper, or you might have a beer, or you might not be so hard on yourself.
True.
Uh, and you would take more time to enjoy life. Like a lot of people work their guts out and then retire, and then like I know a lot of policemen anyway end up dying a couple years after retirement because the amount of stress that they do. Like a lot of the older police officers would work 35 years or 40 years because they don't want to give up that job. They love it so much, but then they're retired for 2 years and they drop dead.
Yep.
And I knew that I was going down that path. And after 15 years, I said, that's it for me. I'm not going to be, one of those guys that just drops dead after retirement.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you got out at a good time, since, the world started to I'm not going to go down that path, but I'm just saying.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I left right when things were hitting
Yeah,
the fan.
before you were like it's funny because I was watching Batman the other day and I was like, this is so like true. And they said, you might be their hero today, but they'll always turn their back. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh my God, that's what they're doing to the police officers.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, our joke was that we should have joined the fire department because everyone loves the firemen. They've got their sexy calendars, and everyone just loves
Right? Well, how come
firemen.
there's no police sexy calendars? What the heck? That's what we need. That's what we need. We should do that. So okay. I could just keep going, but I know you have another show, and then so I will let you go. I do want to give a shout out. I have a somebody that watches, and she shares all over. She's in Indonesia.
Oh, wow.
Zhang, her name is, and she's a beautiful woman. Always watches my show. She's like 12 hours ahead of us. She's probably like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning there, but she still watches. So I always give her
Holy
a shout
smokes.
out. Yeah, I still give her a shout because I love her so much. I love seeing her on here. So and
That's
everybody
awesome.
else. But you know, I have to say, she's very faithful for living in Indonesia. So
That's awesome.
but so before you go, just kind of plug what how people can get in touch with you. I want to have you on again. So
Oh,
after
yeah, no, for sure. I'll
another date.
love to come back on. The easiest way to get in touch with me or anyone from my organization is ppri.net. So it stands for Paranormal Phenomena Research Investigation.net. It's got a contact us form. It's got my biography. It's got a store section where people can find links to. The only one in the organization that's written books is myself and Daryl Walsh. So it's got our books on there. It's got some great resources. There's a research studies section that I added last year, and it's got a list of like important parapsychological studies. A lot of things about telepathy and phone calls, people being able to predict who's going to call them or that a family member is going to call them at a certain time. Just really cool stuff to dig into. And then there's also a resources section as well, which has other reputable organizations, and also a few different links to reputable places that you can take paranormal courses. Um, the only project that we really have coming up, we're trying to get an introduction to parapsychology course developed and teach that online. There's a real demand for it right now. I know.
Yeah, I would totally sign up.
I know the Rhine Education Center is swamped right now with enrollments, and I know Carolyn Watt that teaches the introduction to parapsychology course from the University of Edinburgh. Her class is like booked up for this year already, going into next year. So we are trying to work on getting that released this year. And then the other big project that we're working on is going to be a paranormal case map, which will be available to the public. So the idea behind that is that it's going to show you areas that are haunted. So if you're interested in, say, your state, Rhode Island, or New York State, or Nova Scotia province, you can go on and you can see like what's been uploaded and what's haunted, any UFO sightings, anything like that. And we're going to eventually have it so that people can upload their experiences too. So if you've had a UFO sighting in a certain area, you can upload that, and we'll have one of our investigators review all the data for integrity and things like that, and then add it to the map. So definitely have a couple projects on the go, but
That's awesome.
yeah, we're always keeping busy, and do a lot.
I totally, if you get that class going, I totally want to do it.
Yeah, I'll definitely let you know.
Yeah.
It's about half done because I didn't realize when I came up with the idea. I said to Daryl, because Daryl used to teach, like I told you, at the Nova Scotia Community College, and I said, Daryl, I think we should like move things online, and that's kind of the way people are doing it. Teach it through Zoom, and all of a sudden, I realized how much work is involved in designing a course. So it's taken me a lot longer, but it's definitely.
I mean, I just want to learn. I just want to learn. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like, I love
it'll be
learning.
good. It'll be fun, and Daryl and I will be teaching it, and so you got 2 parapsychologists that you can talk to, and,
Yeah, it'd be
um,
awesome.
yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah, so keep me posted on that. And then again, thank you so much. James will be on next week.
Yes, I saw that. I saw that. He's busy. I mean, he's involved in a few different groups, but,
Yeah, and then the whole
uh
Romania thing that he has coming up next. I'm like, oh, I wish I could do what a once in a lifetime type of an opportunity for some people, myself
Oh,
included.
oh yeah, no, he's really busy. I appreciate any time that he because our organization's all volunteers. Obviously, nobody's paid, but I appreciate any thing that he does for us. And he's got an investigation coming up in February for us, so I'll be interested
That's
to see the
awesome.
results of that.
Now, do you share any of your stuff like on your web pages, like any of your, or is it
We
mostly residential and you can't?
we used to, and then once we reformat the website, we don't kind of have a section like that, but that's what the paranormal case map is gonna be. We're gonna be able to take like some of our cases and upload like some pictures and some video clips and some sounds and things like that. Obviously, keeping confidentiality in mind, depending on what kind of disclosure the homeowners have given us
Sure.
to release. But at the very least, it'll be it could be some vetted information on there. But we are hoping to put some of our cases up there as well for people to take a look at.
Awesome. Well, I thank you so much. I mean, this was awesome. And I appreciate your time. And I totally am going to bug you for another date. So
Oh,
just so
for sure.
you
Yeah, just let me know.
know.
It's
Totally.
well, we have 3 mandates with our organization. So it's investigations, obviously research, and then education is our 3rd mandate. So that's why I love, coming onto these podcasts and disseminating information and things like that. So
I love it. This is why I do it, because what we do and what you do and this and it's not ghost adventures. And people
no, no.
and people that watch that don't a lot of people, I don't want to say all, but a lot of people don't understand that. They think that's what it is. And for me, I like to try to get guests on that will educate and teach people no, this is what it really is like. This is what we do. nobody would watch that. They want to watch somebody get thrown across the room for some reason, as opposed to something
No, it's true.
educational, you know?
Yeah, it's true. There's a big issue with what you see on TV. Like for example, I'll just throw out one fallacy there for sure is that you always see people investigating the dark, but the Society for Psychical Research, which was created in 1882, it's probably one of the longest, if not the original, paranormal investigative organization. Eleanor Sedgwick had done a study where she took hundreds of cases of apparitions and kind of broke down and did like a phenomenological study on it. And she was able to determine that ghosts can appear any day, uh, daytime, nighttime, whether it's raining out, sunny out, indoors, outdoors. There's no rhyme or reason to when you can experience paranormal phenomena. And the reason why the TV shows always get them to shoot night vision and do it in the dark is because of the entertainment fact, and it makes it scarier and spookier. And I can tell you right now, we pitched a TV show to a network, and it was more science based and using technology and bringing older cases, almost like paranormal cold cases, into the laboratory to
Oh, that would
reinvestigate
be
them
awesome.
with the new technology. And we were turned down by the network because it wasn't scary enough. It's too much science, and
What?
they want to scare every 3 minutes.
What about go to the what's that? Go to the Science Channel.
Well, yeah, you might have to start branching out to other networks,
Yeah.
like that don't
Smithsonian Network,
that
History Channel.
yeah, there's different, yeah, even Discovery Channel maybe, but I can tell you right now that the networks are hungry for dramatized paranormal shows.
And why? There's so many of them.
I know. I know.
I mean,
I don't even watch them. Like when somebody's like, "Oh, do you watch this?" I probably haven't seen it. I'll watch like documentaries like surviving, like Netflix's Surviving Death or whatnot. But those ghost adventures and stuff like that, I don't watch any of that.
I do watch Ghost Hunters, Jason and David Tago, and like I do watch that. I've always watched that. I've always respected and the way he investigates, the way that he runs the team, the way that they handle private clients, as opposed to every other show that leave the people crying and wanting to burn their house down, because they think something's going to kill them.
Mhm.
But so yeah, I do watch that one, but that's the only one that's like DVR. You know what I mean? Like that's the only one that I'm like, oh, it's on. I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah.
But other than that, no way.
No, I agree. I agree. It's not worth your time unless you're just looking to
laugh.
kill some time and yeah.
But see, and there's the problem is, God forbid, you have a 14-year-old or 13-year-old watching that, and they think, oh, this is how you're supposed to do this stuff. So I'm just gonna go run around in an abandoned place because they don't know that they're not there. They were given permission. They don't, you know what I mean? They do that little disclaimer at the beginning, but kids don't pay attention to that,
Yeah, I know exactly. No, for sure. And like back when I was interested in this, like during the Unsolved Mysteries time, if I had seen shows like that, I probably would have, thought, oh, these guys are like cool and these guys are experts and this is how you do it, kind of thing. But back then there was no ghost shows on TV, like
Right.
there are today. So
Right.
thank goodness. But there are some people that are serious about it and they'll start researching like where can I take reputable courses and things like that. So hopefully people have common sense to try and find the real experts. I noticed you mentioned University of Virginia because they have a perceptual studies department,
Yes, that's what I was trying to say.
where they specialize in like reincarnation and things like that. You know what I
Yes.
mean? So there's places you can go to and experts that you can seek out that are not fake.
Right. Right. Okay, now I'm gonna let you go. Sorry. See, I'll keep going. I get there's just so much. But anyways, I will let you go and enjoy your next show. And sorry to take up so much of your time, but I
Oh
very
no,
much
it's
appreciate it.
great. Let me know when you want me back on, and I'll definitely make time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, enjoyed this very much, and so did everybody else. Everybody's given me nothing but positive feedback. So thank you so
Well, I
much.
appreciate it. And like I said, if any of your guests that were listening have any more information or questions or anything, they can just go to ppri.net and send me an email.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I look forward to having you on again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, here she is. Now she's saying, see, she stayed the whole time. I didn't even know. Thank you for a great show, Taryn and Paranormal Bro. Elliott Van Dusen is awesome. Indonesia loves you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Now
That's
she's
great.
going to bed. You go to bed, baby. All right. Until next time, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Good
All
night.
right. Good night. Bye.
Thank you, everybody, for joining me. That was really awesome. I cannot wait to have him back on again because that was awesome. Next week, I have our favorite duo, Duo Demonology. They will be coming on just to hang out for a little bit. They have some big stuff coming up, and I want them to be able to promote that. So I hope you join me next Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, on Facebook at Paranormal Brew, BB3 TV, Unrestricted Paranormal 2. Also on Paranormal King Radio Network. They do have a Facebook page. However, you could go to Paranormal King Radio Network. They have a YouTube channel. Great network. And then parapost.net and oh my gosh, Twitch. I just started a Twitch thing. It's not, I don't know how to use it, so I don't know what I'm doing. And that's that. So I hope you guys join me next week. Love you all. Thank you so much. Thank you to my peaches. Love you guys.